And time for our Capitol Report this week with CapitolBeatOK.com's Pat McGuigan. Pat, good to see you this morning. This week, a lot of news about this hearing of current Representative Randy Terrill, former State Senator Debbe Leftwich, accused in a bribery scheme. What does this hearing mean?
It's a preliminary hearing. It's essentially just to decide whether there'll be a trial. That's the decision facing the special judge. You've basically seen now a real crystal clear outline of the evidence. Final deposition, final set of witnesses was Friday. So it's not clear to me how the judge will go, whether he'll decide to bind them over for trial. We may even have that decision already by the time we're talking about this on Saturday. But the bottom line is you've got a strong case for bribery as the prosecutor defines it. And of course, there's disagreement on what that means. Motive has been established, at least it appears to be established, from the fact of the job that former Senator Leftwich would have received in return for stepping down, if all of that holds together in the evidence. And then the means to commit the act of bribery has been laid out by the prosecutor in terms of Representative Terrill because he had the power. So you have the underlying bill, which affected the medical examiner's office. You've got a secretive process, whereas one member testified they didn't know what Representative Terrill was intending and actually didn't see the language, didn't sign the final report. Special legislation, which is forbidden under law, was described by a former Senate Pro Tem Glenn Coffey, now the Secretary of State. So it appears they've laid out the case.
And what's the defense argument in all this?
Well, there's two very different approaches. Senator Leftwich's counsel is taking a kind of a low-key approach and being very careful, worked very hard to get the thing thrown out ahead of time. Didn't succeed in that, but that was, the approach that Robert McCampbell took in defending her. On the other hand, Representative Terrill for a long time, and this week his attorney, Stephen Jones, has been very aggressive and bombastic in pushing back against the prosecutor, basically asserting that it's not a crime, not even distasteful, not even something that shouldn't have happened. It was described at one point as routine, which is kind of interesting because if you remember the legislative analysis of this, where they didn't take punitive action against Terrill, nonetheless described what had happened as reprehensible. So you've got a very big gap there in terms of how it's perceived, whether or not it's a crime. Described the prosecutor as ignorant. To some extent, Jones has even been trying to frame this as laudable, that what he was trying to accomplish was a good thing. So I think Debbe Leftwich's posture appears to be, we didn't mean any harm, didn't know this would create this kind of a storm. We'll see how that all plays out if there's a trial.
What's the next step?
Well, the next step is the aftermath of whatever the special judge has decided or does decide. Will there be a trial? When will it be? Stop and think. The actions alleged here took place in the spring of 2010. The veto came in the early summer. The investigation was beginning in June 2010. You had the report from the prosecutor back in the fall of 2010. Then you had the legislative look at everything. You had the surrender in January 2011. If there's a trial, when will it be? Given that kind of a time frame, even on something like this, we could be looking at a lot of time.
All right, we're running out of time, but I know you want to talk quickly about Tinker Air Force Base. There's some realignment talk that Tinker outline this for us.
Yeah, let me just outline it and talk about what I think it'll mean. There's going to be a single head of sustainment and logistics for the Air Force now, and in a way that's good news. In many ways, that's good news for Tinker. They're going to compact functions. It'll have much less impact here than some other places because they're looking at $450 billion in savings spread out over a decade, and this is how they're achieving it. We lose a 2-star general at Tinker but gain a 3-star. You're going to have maintenance, repair, and overhaul basically being run from Tinker. Now that's a little bit of an overstatement, but basically that's the truth. The bad news, about 250 jobs, even in this thread of good news, 250 jobs, and that can't be good news for the individuals that it affects. about 119 in Oklahoma City, 130 at Altus and Vance. The idea here is long-term sustainability, reducing costs, lowering overhead, maintaining quality work for that incredible fleet of aircraft that are maintained there at Tinker. So it's the classic good news, bad news, or bad news, good news, depending what order you want to put it in.
Right, all right. Well, you can read much more about that and other topics at CapitolBeatOK.com. For Pat McGuigan, I'm Alex Cameron. See you next week.